This episode is brought to you by MoFad, the Museum of Food and Drink, inspiring public curiosity about food. Learn more at mofad.org.
This week on Meat and Three, we bring you stories about the coldest, darkest season. We start in a California vineyard.
It's cold, but it's wet, and things are still alive. There's a lot of life in this soil.
We explore two frontiers of cocktail culture, luxury ice and the rise of non-alcoholic drinks.
The rocks traditionally becomes 25% of your drink's volume, and as such, it imparts smells and tastes.
And we investigate the risks facing New York City delivery workers during the harsh winter.
In the wintertime, after 2 hours of biking, it's quite easy actually for the bikes to spin upside down or slips or slide.
Tune in to this week's episode of Meat and Three, that's MEAT+THREE, for some food for thought to sustain you through the dead of winter. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to The Line. I'm your host, Eli Sussman. Thanks for joining us. Today, my guest is Dennis Ngo. He's the chef and owner of Diandi, a Vietnamese restaurant in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Dennis is a Houston native, and he fell in love with cooking while on a sabbatical from being an information systems consultant, which maybe we'll find out during the show whatever that is. Throughout the course of his culinary career, Dennis has helped open numerous Vietnamese restaurants in New York City, including An Choi, Lucy's Vietnamese Kitchen, Hanoi House, and he also founded Lone Star Empire, a Texas-style smoked brisket operation, which is located at Smorgasburg. Diandi, which means let's go eat in Vietnamese, has been gathering acclaim and excitement since it opened and has quickly cemented itself as both a destination and a neighborhood restaurant. Today we'll discuss what it's like to open up a very big restaurant, brisket both pho style and Texas barbecue style, and of course the trials and tribulations of being a restaurant operator in New York. Dennis, welcome to The Line.
Thank you, Eli.
So I want to start at the beginning with your childhood in Houston. Houston has one of the largest Vietnamese populations in the United States. What was your childhood like growing up there? And were you born there? And were your parents born there, or did they come to the United States as adults?
My parents came over in their 20s, and they ended up in Austin, Texas. And my mom went to school in Austin, Texas. At some point after she graduated, we ended up moving down to Houston. I was born in Austin, but my formative years were spent in Houston. So growing up in Houston, spending a lot of time in Little Saigon, that strip, which when I was growing up was downtown Houston, but now has kind of evolved into the Bel Air area. So, and it's much, much larger than it was when I was growing up. So was really blessed to grow up around a very large Vietnamese community, was very introduced to Vietnamese restaurants at a very early age. And just really fell in love with the food and cuisine and the culture at an early age, and just now really trying to promote that culture here in New York City.
Was there a push-pull with your parents growing up between a traditional or a more traditional Vietnamese household with traditions, food consumption, and also you lived in a sprawling metropolis in the United States, Houston, which has a very diverse representation? Were you trying to be kind of like the American teenager, or was it sort of a blend?
Definitely was a blend. Yeah, you're right. Houston, I think is one of the most diverse cities now. Definitely growing up as a teenager, wanting to rebel against everything that was around me. So doing the exact opposite of what my parents said. I think they quickly realized they were going to lose this battle, so they kind of let it be kind of a blend of both worlds. And I think that was a smart move on their part. We were just terrible, terrible children. So,
what do you mean by that? Like, were you guys just troublemakers through and through, or?
I think I was a pretty poor student, very poor student, and for an Asian, well, any parent, but particularly for an Asian family, school being very important. Did not excel in that growing up, so that was a bit challenging, trying to find my way. I give a lot of credit to my mom and dad. They had to put up with quite a bit from myself, just particularly.
So what does that look like as you're trying to find your way during those formative years when every kid turns into a teenager and you just don't know where you fit in basically anywhere? Did food, cooking, did it provide any framework to you at that young of an age, or did that came much later?
Yeah, so for me, I wish I grew up in a situation where I found my passion early on. That definitely wasn't the case for me. So I always think it's an interesting story to tell other people of my age and people that are switching mid-careers. This was something that I fell into when I was in my 30s. And, like going back what you said, I was an information systems consultant for a long time, and I still don't know what that means. And I did that for 6 years.
Yeah, I was hoping you could shed some light on what that consists of. So is that on the technical side, or are you on the human placement side? What does that mean?
I wore a lot of hats when I was working in consulting, and never really sure what I was getting at. I think a lot of the comments about consultants, you just end up being a jack of all trades with no real skill. At least that was my career path. And I never really had an interest in food growing up either. I was actually a very picky eater. So I'm not really sure where like this all kind of came into place for myself, but I knew after working in my desk job for 6 years that it wasn't for me. And fortunately at the time they offered a sabbatical, so I after a certain amount of time I was able to take 3 months off, and then for whatever reason restaurant culture. This was around the time when Bourdain just released his book A Cook's Tour, and then that was being romanticized, and that definitely had a big part of my interest in hospitality, because it was an industry I never worked in growing up. My jobs in college weren't in a restaurant, so I had no experience with that culture. And I remember reading that book and being slightly interested in enough to take a sabbatical and then wash dishes at a restaurant here in Williamsburg.
So when you went to college, what did you get your degree in that kind of led you into this consulting style of career?
Right.
And then also when you took your sabbatical, you were in New York. So was your entire career in New York, your professional career here?
No, it wasn't. So there actually is a major called Management Information Systems, and that is what I majored in. Really it ends up being about just how do you use systems and computers to accomplish tasks in big organizations, organizational tasks. So it's kind of like half computer programming, half business classes. But to answer your question, so as a consultant, you travel a lot. I was on the road 9 months out of the year, 4 days out of the week, I'd be traveling somewhere. My clients were all up in the Northeast. I was working in financial services at the time. So I was flying up to Toronto specifically, and then traveling back home to Houston every week. A lot of times you did not have to go back home to your home city. You could just travel wherever you wanted. So I would inevitably fly to New York quite a bit, being in Toronto and spending a lot of time here. Realized quickly that I really wanted to be here, never having lived outside of Texas. So made the move up here. And that's when I just kind of started falling in love with the restaurant industry and the hospitality. Eating out here was totally different than eating out back home. Texas, you have to drive everywhere. Here, the culture of being able to walk or take a cab, you got to remember this is before Uber, it really changes your dining experience. I don't have to necessarily start worrying about how much I'm consuming or drinking at dinner. Whereas in Houston, that was always in the back of your head of like, oh man, how am I going to get home? Mm-hmm. You're not calling cabs. So, just being up here at that time, it was kind of just a magical time for myself, and just a lot of things fell into line. I was just, I think that's one of the things I love about New York, putting yourself out there. If you really want something to happen, you can kind of almost will it into existence in terms of like, you really want something to happen. If you're just really pushing yourself and you're always thinking about it and always trying to get yourself to that goal, you end up meeting the right people at the right time. And I don't think necessarily that's just luck. That's just putting yourself in a good position. And I really have New York to thank for that and helping me kind of push me along in my career.
But people must have thought that there was just some amount of insanity to your plan, which was, oh, I've got a great career. I'm traveling quite a bit. I have financial stability to do these things. And I think I'll take some time off and maybe I'll wash dishes for a while at a restaurant.
Yeah, I remember my manager looking at me incredulously when I told him what I was going to do and was like, are you sure you really want to do this This does not make any sense. My parents were very upset for a long time. It's only very recently that they've kind of come around about my career choice.
So where did you go and wash dishes in Williamsburg?
So I remember reading about this Vietnamese guy opening up a Vietnamese restaurant on North Berry and 9th. And this is early 2000s. It was called Silent H. So I remember reading on Eater that this guy was opening up, and I was like, oh man, I'd love to meet this guy. He seems like he's doing something very interesting in Vietnamese food. I've never cooked, but obviously very passionate about Vietnamese food. And then, like I said, I don't remember the circumstances of it specifically, but we somehow ended up at a party together and not knowing each other, and somehow someone connected us together, and we ended up having a smoke outside, and I got to meet this guy that I had just been reading about a couple weeks previously. And I just told him, hey, man, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Never cooked in a restaurant, have zero experience, but let me come wash dishes. That's what I read. If, nobody's going to turn down free work. That was, and as somebody in their 30s, I wasn't necessarily looking to go back to go to cooking school either. I figured this was my quickest path, my most direct path, if I just offered up my time.
How does a picky kid from Houston who has a professional career decide that this is what they might want to do? You literally could have done anything, right? You could have said, I think I want to try to figure out how to work on a cruise ship, a race car driver, like literally anything. You knew you wanted to switch. What was that either piece of information or that bite of food or that thing that you saw that really turned the dial for you and said, I think I've got to be involved in restaurants and hospitality somehow?
Sure. Well, it starts with, just being very dissatisfied in a desk job. I think a lot of people can understand that 100%. And I was in that situation of just like, I don't see where this is going. I can't imagine I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing this. And the time when I was living in New York, I was living in the East Village, just really enjoying the culture around restaurants here. And I remember Sambar opening up at the time. They were right down the block from me, and they started in the late night stuff where Tien Ho was cooking. And I remember being a diner there, and you could see Dave Chang running around, yelling at all the cooks. And at the time, not knowing, just where this was going to go, but I just remember watching the entire dance around me and how exciting that was, and the food that they were putting out. And I just really fell in love then and there. Just like, man, this seems like so much fun. Little did I realize how much work was involved. But that I think a lot of people fall in love with that, just that whole idea of seeing the front but not knowing about the stuff that happens in the back. Yeah,
our trajectory is very similar. I used to sit at a desk. I saw the show. I wanted to be in the show. And then I didn't realize how much work goes into the show on the back end in the back of house. So you're back there washing dishes. How long did it take? Was it at that restaurant that you had your first ability to work the line, to maybe do some prep, to get involved with food in a more real, concrete way? Was it after the 3-month period?
No, it was during that time. To his credit, Vin, he was the owner of Silent H. He really took a shot on me, and I washed dishes kind of part time for a little bit, and then he started just giving me little tasks to do, little prep tasks. During the day, it was a banh mi shop, so I got a little exposure with food handling, making sandwiches, and then it was a small business, so you kind of had to wear a lot of different hats, and he didn't have a huge staff, so inevitably something happened where he needed an extra set of hands doing something, and he pulled me in. And after a while you start working your way around different stations and getting exposed to different things, and then I really feel I think that's really there where it's like, I really enjoy doing this. I really like working my hands. I like being on my feet all day. I like the satisfaction of working a very long day, and the enjoyment afterwards of having a drink or commiserating with your fellow coworkers about how the service went. It was just a different feeling that I had never experienced previously. I definitely didn't experience working at a desk job.
Do you remember when you quit your other job? Does it vividly stick out in your mind how you did it and how you felt immediately afterwards? Yeah,
I finished the 3 months, finished the sabbatical, decided to go back to work to save some more money. I quickly also realized the difference in pay scale, and living in New York, it's not cheap. So, I made sure I had a plan, made sure that I knew I was going to go back, save some money for a bit, and see, and at least give myself a cushion where I could let this kind of play out and see what's going to happen. I gave myself like about a year. And so I went back and worked for I think another 9 months, and then I gave my notice and then left. I think they saw the writing on the wall as well. I didn't really tell anybody what was going on, but I mentally checked out. I was already just super geared about
you office spaced it a little bit, showing up at 10 with Hawaiian shirt on, just not really mentally involved in the current job. So when you transition into your restaurant career, do you end up at An Choi right away? Do you hook up with your current business partner sort of right away, or does that come later on?
So, just another fortunate situation. I went back to Silent H. I worked there for a bit. And then I met my current partner, Tuan, just randomly out in New York City again and having drinks somewhere. I think we were on a rooftop in Williamsburg somewhere before all the towers were up, and you could still see the water from a couple blocks back. And I remember sharing a drink from my flask with Tuan, and he told me he was opening a restaurant, and it gets kind of blurry there. But he finds out I cook, and then we just kind of go back and forth. And it took about, I think like a year to get An Choi off the ground. But just like another one of those situations, I was just working really hard at the time, trying to meet people, putting myself out there, and then just got really lucky again, and met somebody that was opening another restaurant.
So don't be too humble when you answer this question. When you actually got in the kitchen and you started really digging in, did you find yourself to be just naturally talented at cooking, or was it a longer process? And did you think to yourself, I enjoy this, but I've got to dig in really hard here? Like, did you have the skill sets inside you already?
No, definitely did not. And there was a time during An Choi's existence, that first year, getting hired to be the chef at a restaurant, I was woefully inexperienced to do that. I don't think my partner realized. I don't think I realized either at the time. It took some very unfortunate situations to happen at An Choi, some learning experiences for myself and Tuan, to realize just like, oh man, we're really over our heads here. And there was a time, I think about 9 months in, after like all the buzz had come down, that I thought to myself, I don't know if I can do this. I think I might have to quit and go back to my other job, because I felt like the restaurant wasn't doing well. I didn't have the organization or the systems in place, because I never worked for anybody. I kind of worked for one person and then got a chef job, that is not the normal career path of a chef. Usually you're in it for a long time, working under somebody, getting mentored along the way before you take on the reins of a restaurant. And I just kind of got expedited, and it was great. I really wanted the responsibility, but I was not ready for that kind of situation yet. I think just like anybody else, I needed a mentor. And fortunately, I was able to find one out of the grace of God. He just kind of like fell from the heavens before I decided to put my notice in. And
who is that? Who'd you connect with?
That's a very long story in itself, Eli. That could be a whole other podcast. I feel like it could be a Netflix series. But, really shortly, he literally just walked in off the street. And he had a set of knives on him, and he had clothes on him. And we were looking for somebody to help me. And we literally hired him on the spot that day. So he was an older gentleman. I couldn't make this up. But he was the one that I needed mentorship at the time. And I think that's a really important aspect of our industry, about mentorship and growing, learning from others. But yeah, when I started, I had no clue what I was doing, and I still had no clue what I was doing when we opened An Choi.
So does this secretive guardian angel guy, does he basically say, I've got a lot of experience, lean on me, let me show you how to run a kitchen? Let me show you how to create dishes? Like he just appeared?
he literally just appeared. Really quickly. So what happened was I had a mutiny on my hands from the kitchen staff, because I had no idea how to run a kitchen. Mm-hmm. So everybody quit one day on me. The entire kitchen walked out. All the support staff, everybody. So we had to close for 1 day of service. And then we just put an ad out on Craigslist, and that's when he walked in. We had just gotten like a New York Times 25 and under review at the time. And I remember there was a pickle shop next to us. And this guy who came in was like, oh, I was trying to go to the pickle shop and I read about you guys in the New York Times. Why you guys closed? And so, we explained to him, what happened. And then he's like, oh, I cook. And I was like, get out of here. He's an older guy, too. He was in his 60s, it looked like. Mm-hmm. But like I said, he had a set of knives on him. He had a change of clothes. And we went down to Chinatown and he cooked us a 3-course meal. And then he started the next day, and I worked with him for, I think, the next 4 or 5 years every day. And he was the one that taught me. It wasn't even about the cooking necessarily. It was about how to organize yourself, mise en place, how to be a chef, how to talk to others, how to treat your kitchen crew, how to set discipline, how to set rules. These are things that are all very obvious. But when you're in the shit every day of just trying to do service, you don't necessarily have the time to sit back and think, because I was on the line, I was doing everything, and how to set those things up and how important those things are to be done ahead of time, not once the ship has sailed. So very thankful to this individual who really, really got me to where I am today, and my partner as well, because I'm not really sure, until he's still around, and they're 10 years in now, if he doesn't show up.
When everyone walks out that day, did you think to yourself, this is about them or this is about me? Where do you think the responsibility fell on that day when you felt that everyone
100%
left?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah, 100% me. I just mismanagement, didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, that's definitely on my, I'm the chef. So everything always falls on you.
When you reflect back on that now, is it painful to think about that moment and embarrassing, or do you feel good about it in a way that it kind of maybe turned things around?
No, I mean, it was a learning experience. I had to take those lumps. I had to take that L there to get where I am now. Like I said, and if that doesn't happen, if they stick around, I probably would have left, because I was never going to be able to get us to that next phase of just being a normal functioning operating restaurant. The things I learned in that compressed time frame from this individual, you couldn't buy that kind of information. I could have gone to cooking school and still wouldn't have learned what I've learned during that time with this individual. So I'm actually very thankful that this is how it all kind of played out. It was the right way for it to work for myself.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Chef Dennis No.
Episode is brought to you by MoFad, the Museum of Food and Drink. Featuring a variety of interactive displays, MoFad encourages eaters of all ages to be curious about food. The museum currently operates MoFad Lab, a 5,000 square foot experimental space in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where Chow, making the Chinese American restaurant, is currently on show until the end of March 2019. This exhibition celebrates the birth and evolution of Chinese American restaurants, tracing their nearly 170-year history and sparking conversations about food culture, immigration, and what it means to be American. It highlights the evolution timeline of Chinese American restaurant menus, dating back to 1910, and also highlights a tasting section where participants get to enjoy tastings created by the country's most talented chefs who specialize in Chinese American cuisine. Make sure you check out Chow while you still can. The exhibition closes at the end of March 2019. Check out MoFad's tastings and extensive event calendar at mofad.org/events.
Are you enjoying this podcast? Heritage Radio Network has plenty more. I'm Damon Bolte.
And I'm Souther Teague.
Together we host The Speakeasy, a show where we discuss cocktails, spirits, wine, beer, tea, coffee, and all things in the liquid universe.
Yeah, our guests range from bartenders and brewers, alchemists and ambassadors, roasters and regulars, hippies and homebrewers, and every expert enthusiast in between.
Browse episodes of The Speakeasy wherever you listen to podcasts and on heritageradionetwork.org.
Welcome back to The Line. My guest today is Chef Dennis Ngo. He is one of the owners and the chef of Diandi, a Vietnamese restaurant in Greenpoint. The restaurant is beautiful. It's very big. I want to talk about how you and your partners found the space and how you transformed the space. I know that you had a design team, the Ladies and Gentlemen Studios, help with the overall visuals, but it feels so current, but it doesn't feel overblown or overdone. I would love for you to talk about the space and how that impacts the service style and also the food and the presentation.
Sure. So we, obviously very challenging finding spaces in New York City. We looked all around Bushwick. Didn't really think too much of this space when we saw it, when we saw an ad for it. It was a little bit out of our price range. But I lived in Greenpoint previously. I really enjoyed living over there at the time. And I had noticed just how many other restaurants were popping up over there. I knew that there wasn't too much waterfront left to develop, so I knew there was a lot of development going on in Greenpoint. So we went to check out the space. And when I saw it, I was blown away just with how beautiful it was. For the people that have never been to our space, it's a very long space. It has about 70 seats, and there's an extension in the back where is really the bulk of the restaurant, where there's skylights throughout the space. So there's a ton of natural light. And the kitchen is open. You can totally see the kitchen from the dining room, and there's natural light in there, which I knew right away I'm going to push for this space, because if I'm going to be here 16 hours a day, I don't want to be in a basement. So, we fell in love with the space instantly. The infrastructure and the bones of the space were already there, so we didn't really have to do too much. We turned it over to our partners, Ladies and Gentlemen Studio, Hui Bui, Michael Urinsky from ADO. We're very blessed to have a lot of talented friends, and they kind of did their thing with it. They built the furniture, they had the design aesthetic all mapped out for us, and we just kind of let them run with it. So, all props to them for taking what was an already very beautiful space, but making it even more beautiful, more inviting, more welcoming. And I think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of people are checking us out initially. It's to check out the space. They did such a great job with the space. But it is very challenging. It is a very large, long space. I think I had never worked in a space that big. I've never fed that many people at once. Doing 3.5 turns on a 72-seat restaurant is very challenging for us. We only have 3 cooks on the line, and they kick ass every day. I think we really underestimated the distance and travel people have to walk in our space, front of house especially, having to move back and forth from the front to the back, and how many steps and how long that takes was something that we did not take into account for when we were planning out our staffing, trying to figure out how many people we need to hire.
It's so interesting that you talk about the steps that the staff takes, because to get food from the kitchen to that back room, that's part of what being a restaurant owner is about. But you don't really necessarily think about that in the beginning. You don't think about how turning tables and where you're going to hold people and where the bathrooms might be relative to the farthest table. It is such a beautiful space, but it is gigantic. And I wondered if that was going to be intimidating upon opening, because the thing about your restaurant is you're very lucky. It's very busy all the time, but it's so big and it's so spread out that if you had 45 people seated, it might not look that full.
Yeah.
Which can be kind of scary and feel problematic, right?
Totally. And that's something we discussed when we were coming up with our business plan.
And 45 seated is good.
It's good,
That's really solid,
Yeah, so fortunately, we have 3 distinct dining rooms. So, we kind of have a plan, when, that wouldn't inevitably happen where, and on the weekdays, it's not as crazy as it is on the weekends for us. So, we definitely have those times where it's only 35, 40 people in the restaurant, and it can feel kind of a little bit deserted. And that's always a bad look when you walk into a restaurant. So, I think it's about strategizing with the front. We have a really great service manager who understands that, okay, if it's a slower night, maybe we don't seat everybody throughout the restaurant and all the 3 distinct dining areas. He knows that, okay, well, we should try to seat everybody towards the front. So it creates a more lively, full atmosphere. But yeah, it is. I cannot overestimate how challenging it was to work in the space. Having such a large space exposes to a lot more problems. And yeah, just all the different things that you don't think of in operating a space that large. While we're blessed with a lot of space, we're cursed with a lot of space.
When it comes to menu construction and plating, does any of that natural light and those kind of bright color tones that you chose, you've got a lot of like pastel-y kind of colors in the space, a lot of greenery, which for me kind of mimics a lot of the plates, right? Like you always get a big plate of leafy greens and you can make your own kind of wraps and things like that. The plates are really beautiful. They're not overdone. Did you have the plating visualized before you came in for everything, or was it at all inspired by the space, the size, the kitchen?
Right. Are you talking about the plateware itself? Or
No, like your plating. Yeah.
I adhere to, I try to stress to the kitchen team about not making things too fussy and just keep respecting. I really feel myself and the kitchen team, we're just stewards of the food. We're not really inventing anything here. These are dishes that we all grew up eating, whether back home or in Vietnam. And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. These are things that were already delicious to begin with. So it's really our job to take care of these dishes and put out the best possible version of this dish every single day. So that really drives about how we do our plating. I don't want to get things overly complicated or too designy or too chefy. It should just be very rustic, look very clean. I think we can find beautiness in just being a normal plate up. These things are already very interesting to look at. I don't see the need to fussy it up. So a lot of that is just driven by the cuisine itself. I didn't want to make it, like I said, too fussy.
Do you have dishes on the menu where you've stretched very far away from their traditional original orientation, or is most of the menu really rooted in sort of its authentic original flavor profile?
No, it's definitely all rooted in authentic Vietnamese flavors, flavor profiles, all the ingredients. Obviously we don't have the same access to herbs, protein, seafood that you'll get in Vietnam. So that's where it's an opportunity for us to use what's around us here in New York, our accessibility to different types of proteins, but still creating dishes that if my mom walked in, and that's like my baseline. If my mom walks in, is she going to feel comfortable eating this? She's not the most adventurous eater. She really, she eats Vietnamese food almost every single day. She has to be able to come in and be comfortable eating this and not be like, what the hell is this, Dennis? Everything that we put out, it's rooted in something that we grew up eating or that we've tasted.
The economics of a restaurant in New York they're pretty miserable, honestly. And you said a couple minutes ago that the space you found was out of your price range, but it had so many things going for it. Obviously, you guys made the decision to secure this space. Your partners have an existing restaurant where you were the chef, not a partner. Now you're a partner. I'm curious about the whole process of both logistically organizing yourself with them as becoming an owner and a partner, and also if you can speak at all to the financials of it. Was it easier or harder to fundraise, get a bank loan, whatever you may have done, considering that they had another location that had 10 years under its belt?
Oh, that definitely helped. Restaurants are inherently a risky venture. I would not recommend anyone invest in a restaurant. So being able to have people on your team that have exhibited competence and the ability to operate a restaurant in 10 years in New York City, which is no easy feat, definitely gets people's attention. And it definitely helped in getting the funding that we needed to open the restaurant. We didn't take any bank loans. We took, we reached out to our network of friends, family, and extended friends and family, and were able to secure the money that we needed to open D&D. I think, operating a business, that whole setup, that could be many podcasts about how difficult and challenging it is. New York City does not make it easy to operate a business. But, you know.
It almost seems like they want you to fail, honestly.
Yeah, and especially for hospitality lately. Very challenging.
The enormity of what goes into the job. Obviously, you've had a totally separate career, but sometimes when people ask me, I say that I've had to learn so much about things that I never considered at all. I obviously knew that there would be cooking involved and that there would be aspects of dealing with humans, day-to-day, staff, customers, right? But I really didn't realize that I was going to have to read so much contracts, that I was going to have to deal with the city and permits, and that I'd be on the phone all the time with a lawyer. All these things that you didn't really plan for, right?
Right.
First part of this question is, did your first career help you at all for the second stage of your professional career? Just being part of a professional office and how the tone and the kind of the cadence of a day is not the same as a restaurant. And then also, what were the things that blindsided you and caught you off guard when you became an owner?
Good question. Definitely, I'm an Excel stud. So, I learned that working in consulting. I'm very familiar with the office products. So, a lot of being a chef is inventory management, food costs. Honestly, I don't cook that much as I wish I was cooking. A lot of my day is checking invoices, making sure everything gets entered in. Are our food costs on track? Or, the management side of this is a whole other experience that I definitely think my career in consulting helped guide me along on that. It definitely was very helpful. Now, there's a lot of things that did not translate very well. Managing a kitchen team as opposed to managing a set of employees at an office, totally different things. There's different mindsets. There's different motivations on both sides. It's much more challenging managing a kitchen team, I feel like, than managing in a 9-to-5 job. So I think that just the people management was a skill that obviously I did not have. An entire kitchen walked out on me. So that was something that is a learning curve, and I still struggle with on today. It's something that I hope myself and my partners acknowledge and realize that that's something that we need to get better at.
As you enter into, the next year, we're in 2019 at your restaurant, what do you look forward to? And what are you maybe dreading, or what are you the most scared about? It could be maybe a labor law change. Obviously, the minimum wage went up. That affects business owners. But it could also be something totally personal, unrelated, maybe directly to the fabric of the day-to-day at the restaurant.
Yeah, definitely aware of all the changing dynamics within the hospitality industry. I think the tip credit is now up for review, and how that will impact front of house and our restaurant. I'm a liberal in that sense of, I support all these things. I want to pay everybody, a living wage. I want to pay everybody as much as I possibly can. I want everybody to have healthcare. But now being on the business side, how do we balance all of that stuff as well and the needs of the restaurant? That's very challenging. That keeps me awake a lot. And that's the number one big stress point. It's not even necessarily, the food definitely is, a key part of it, but just operating this business and where the hospitality industry is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years. It's a little concerning. I wish we had opened this place 10 years ago when things were a little bit different. But we were not, and we're in this day and age where, I don't know what's going to happen. So that keeps me awake a lot at night. But, I'm also very optimistic in the sense that when I sit back and look at what we have and what we've accomplished in 1 year, the restaurant it's busy. People understand what we're trying to do. There's still a lot of things we have to work on, but the opportunity ahead of us is so bright that I think we'll be able to weather any kind of challenge that comes along with the business side of this. But it's going to take a lot of hard work, and I think it's something that we're realizing, as a team that this has unlimited potential, and not everybody gets that kind of opportunity. So we should feel very fortunate and blessed that we get to come in on a daily basis and cook for people that really appreciate what we're doing in a beautiful space. And, for the most part, we're not all assholes at the restaurant, which, we have a pretty nice working environment, I'd like to think. So, it's a lot to juggle, but, I feel more optimistic than pessimistic. But, definitely the changing economics of the restaurant industry and hospitality, food going up, it keeps me awake, for sure.
You had a mentor many years ago, and you mentioned that at Som Bar, you went there for dinner and you were inspired by the late night that Tien Ho was doing.
Yep.
I'm curious about now, you run and own and co-own your own restaurant. Is there anyone out there right now that you look to, it could be in New York, it could be in another city, as either a mentor or inspirational, something that you've tasted or seen recently that you thought, I'm going to put that in the back of my mind, or I'm going to take that back to my own spot and maybe implement it somehow?
Oh, like creatively copying everyone?
No. Like something that that you've seen that really
inspiration.
Yeah, that turned the light bulb on.
I feel very blessed all the time, every day in that regard. There's a very nice community of Asian restaurants that are happening now. Greenpoint itself is its restaurant scene has grown quite considerably since we opened as well. So just the chefs around me that I see on a day-to-day basis and what they're doing really motivates me. The guys over at Winsun, I really appreciate. Josh and Trig, they make really, really excellent food, and they're kicking ass. And now they're about to open their next spot. We have my friend Justin down the block in Greenpoint, Oshimoko, him and his chef, what they're doing with Mexican food and the type of dining that they're bringing to Greenpoint, just how polished it is, very aspirational. Paulie G down the block from us as well, and what he's done with the Slice Shop. It's just watching the success of these friends and colleagues in the industry. It keeps you motivated, it keeps you pushing. I want to be like these guys. I want the next spot, and that takes a lot of hard work, and I think sometimes you forget about that in the minutia of the day-to-day of just unpacking boxes or doing your prep, that, it's going to take a lot of hard work to get where we want to get to, and getting everybody on the same page, and guiding the team to where we want to get to. Those are things I pull from all these other restaurants, and like, this is where we got to get to. What are we going to do about it?
Do you have a either written down or in your head a 2-5 year plan of where you might want things to go, or are you more of a let things roll and deal with them as they come and react to them?
I don't necessarily like to put hard timelines on things. I don't get stressed out if I missed that year goal or whatever. So I don't do it in that way. I definitely know that one restaurant's not going to be enough to feed the squad. The dream is, for me, not necessarily to be like the best Vietnamese restaurant. It's about creating a group where all these great people I'm working with now currently, we can stay working together forever, as long as we're all passionate about Vietnamese food and do all these creative things in the Vietnamese space that I've seen done everywhere else, but has not been brought here to New York City yet. So the opportunity here is here. So, there's no 1, 2, 5 year plan, but, we'll have passed 1 year this year. I think this year is now about, we got it open now. Let's really tighten things up. Let's get these systems in place. We've got a working system, but we could always be doing a lot better. And, really activating the space 100% of the time. Right now, we're only open for dinner, and that's 4 hours on the weekdays and soon to be 5 hours on the weekends. So we've got this late night time. We've got this Monday that we're closed. We've got lunch. We've got brunch, which we haven't started. So, for us, really this year is about focusing on that, making D&D the best it can be. And then, starting to think about the next thing. Because like I said, one's not enough to feed the squad, and we got a good squad. So I really want to keep working with these guys for as long as I can, and that means we got to do something else.
Maybe that other thing could be brisket. You're a Texas guy. Tell me a little bit about your love relationship with brisket. what's up with Lone Star?
Well, I have some sad news for you, Eli. It's going to be RIP for Lone Star. I decided to close it up. So we're going to end our run at Smorgasburg.
Didn't disappoint a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm disappointed as well. That was a really magical time for me as well. That was part of my cooking journey. Because after Anchoy, I went to do that, and I started doing the Market Hustle for 6 years, and that's catering, mobile food, and that's a totally different part of your brain that you have to flex.
Totally.
As opposed to cooking in a restaurant. A lot of credit to Eric Demby and the staff over at the Brooklyn Flea, because without their help and support that I received from them and their encouragement along the way, I would not be where I am here at D&D as well, because a lot of that money that I earned while working those shifts at those markets, I was able to save up, and that's what kind of helped seed D&D for myself. So, that was a really big part of my cooking career as well. But yeah, so Lone Star, that it's done. It's just too much for me to manage. The restaurant is 100% consuming me, and I just felt like I wasn't giving the Lone Star any love or attention anymore. So I just decided that it's done.
Possible that we'll see a late night brisket pop up maybe.
That would be totally cool.
Space.
And I really want to do something late night. I really enjoyed all those late nights at Sambar when Tien Ho was cooking, and I love that vibe. I'd love to be able to bring that to Greenpoint. It's just we just got to find the time for the cooks so that they can do their normal stuff, but then try to do a late night service. I think that would be. But that's where I think we could really do some fun and interesting things outside of just Vietnamese food. We have such a beautiful loaded kitchen that it's criminal that we're not using it to its full extent right now.
Dennis, thanks so much for being here and sharing your trajectory and hearing a little bit about your story. And obviously, congratulations on the restaurant. And I hope that the next year is even better than the first. Tell everybody listening just the website and then also the address so that they can find you if they want to come by.
Sure. D&D is at 68 Greenpoint Avenue. You can take the G train to Greenpoint Avenue. It's a block walk up. And the address of the website is diandi.nyc.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
And everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of The Line. You can join us every Tuesday at 11 a.m. for brand new episodes with chefs and restaurateurs here on Heritage Radio.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to learn more about our 10-year anniversary celebration happening all year long, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network.
Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows that you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.